let me drag you away from your stimulating and thoughtful conversations. Sounds like a great buzz in the room. We are here to listen to Peter Meurs, and some of you have listened to him today. He is the Managing Director of WorleyParsons, and if you had anything to do with the CEO Forum this afternoon, or you heard from him at the end of the day upstairs, you will kind of get the drift that this company is doing something really serious, although Peter might not quite agree with that, doing something very serious in CSR in this company. And I think he obviously is one of the, early adopters, if you like, of CSR in Australia. And if more companies had started on the road, as I said to you, they haven't even started on the road, and he says, well, we're not far down the road. But don't take any notice of that. Just welcome Peter Meurs.
Thanks, Rob. And I really do feel like we are just beginning the journey, so I hope you'll forgive that. But and also realise that I'm speaking between you and continuing the networking that you've already started, and that looks like there is lots of energy in the room, and so I won't speak for very long, but I thought I would just tell a few stories about some of the things that we've been involved in, and maybe they'll help us all on the CSR journey. I'd like to first of all congratulate Anne-Maree on having this forum. It really is something that's needed in the community, and we need to be organised as corporate participants in Australia, and so it's wonderful that someone's taking the time to do that. It's also pretty rare for WorleyParsons to come and speak at something, and we thought this was something important enough to come and participate in, mainly because we're shy and don't like talking about ourselves, and I'm particularly that way. I'd like to just first of all talk about some of our current experience, and then maybe mention a few things about the future as we see it. We embarked on a journey about 12 years ago of deciding that we'd go down a long-term contracting or alliancing journey with our customers. And we saw that in other parts of the world and thought that that was a place that we needed to be. And the sort of services we provide are capital works for our customers. We design processing plants in the oil and gas business, in minerals and metals, power stations, water treatment plants. And we decided that we'd try to help our customers on a long-term basis by forming long-term alliances with them. And that's a fairly tough kind of contracting. It's a contracting where we get our reward out of achieving our customers' objectives as they change over time. When we started that journey in 1995, we knew nothing about it, really. We'd read a bit in books, and we'd seen what some other companies were doing. But we started on the journey anyway. And our customers' objectives in those early days were to save money and finish projects on time, and so that's what we were measured on. As time went on, they added safety as a key issue, and then gradually, over the years, they've become more sophisticated in what they've wanted. As we've achieved goals, they've lifted the bar and expected more of us. And almost all the major organisations we're working for now have high goals around safety, resourcing, power usage, power efficiency, sustainability, environmental impact. And so we've been dragged along by our long-term relationships with our customers into real CSR areas. And I can't claim any credit for that. We've had to do it to stay in business. But along the journey, it's been a lot of fun. I mentioned in the CEO's forum, and I apologise to those that were there, that we formed in the year 2000 a best practice forum for our key customers. And what we'd recognised is that as we worked across then about 20 different customers, that their issues and problems and challenges were all very similar, even though they were in different parts of the industry. And so we got this best practice forum together with some opposition, and I talked about that. These people had never spoken to each other before and certainly didn't think there was any right for Worley and our partner Transfield to get them together to talk about best practice issues. But they came together and we started talking about safety, and then over the years that best practice forum has developed into a really major exercise. In fact, we'll have 500 people at a forum at our next annual forum meeting in Brisbane in March next year, from probably 15 or 16 countries and representing about 150 different companies. And surprise, surprise, the agenda at that forum has moved from delivering projects successfully to a whole range of CSR type issues. Again, sustainability, environmental impact, how we're going to find resources in the future. And so, again, that drive from industry to take us on this CSR journey. And I'm really encouraged that the major organisations, certainly the major resource organisations, all have CSR not only on the agenda but now a key part of their corporate goals and objectives. 2 years ago, WorleyParsons, as it's spread around the world, acquired a company called Comex. And Comex are an environmental organisation based out of Canada with offices around the world. And they're just an inspirational company. Their mantra is that they can go into a resource organisation and improve their environmental performance and always save money in the process. And that's a pretty exciting concept. It's the sort of thing that we want to hear, but they prove it in how they work. And as a result of the work that they do, they're the most exciting organisation to visit. I've never met a more dynamic group of people. They're involved every day in doing exactly that, finding solutions for their customers that save money and improve the environmental performance. And everyone in that organisation, there's about 500 strong, are excited about that concept. And as I think of CSR, I think that's what's going to happen to our organisations. We're going to see new energy and new excitement and development come into our organisations as we get on the CSR bandwagon. And we've got one of the founders of CSR in our office in Perth, in WorleyParsons, and he's already generating that kind of energy with our customers and with us internally. In fact, I've just ordered the solar panels for my roof because, you've got no option when you're around people like that. You've just got to get on the bandwagon and do it. Now, one of the things that came out of our best practice forum, and this is an example, I think, of how we can make a difference, is a need to change how we train people in safety. And I use this sort of as an example of collective thinking that we can have in our industry. So I don't know if you understand what happens, but the major resource organisations are all very, very committed to safety. So committed, in fact, that if you want to go and work on one of those sites, they give you an induction before you go on the site to make you safe. Now, those inductions have got longer and longer as they have different incidents, and now you typically get inducted for 1 or 2 days, PowerPoint presentations about how you can be safe on the site. The problem is that in Australia today, our workforce moves from site to site. So people in our organisation, as they move to 3 or 4 sites in a year, will be inducted for 2 days, 3 or 4 times a year. The inductions are long, boring, but they're also different. So when you're out working on the site after being inducted, you've got to try and remember which of those inductions you had and what procedure and process you're supposed to follow. Now that sounds totally ridiculous, but that's how it is. And so we said, this is crazy. Why don't we create an experiential induction centre where we expose people to real equipment and show them how they can be safe? It makes good sense. We went around the country, we talked to about 800 people in industry, and we've built the first induction centre in Perth with 15 more planned around the country. Now, the exciting part about this is that we're simply facilitating as a not-for-profit activity as an organisation on behalf of industry. The whole thing's being sponsored by major organisations. They've got together collectively. We're just acting as a facilitator, as I said. And training's being provided by external training providers. And we're talking together in this one area of safety. And it's happening. It's not easy. There's safety professionals involved, and they've got different ideas about how we should be trained, and we're just trying to deal with that. But we're gradually getting there. But I think the same thing can happen again in this CSR area. As we get companies together and get them thinking together, as we collaborate together, we'll be able to share ideas and have some success. Just a few thoughts. Thinking about the future, a major part of our business is the oil and gas business. And as we think about the major oil and gas suppliers in the world and the major oil and gas companies, we think of names like Exxon, Mobil and Shell and Chevron and BP. surprisingly, they represent a very small portion of the oil reserves in the world. And those companies are all very committed to sustainability and CSR type issues. The real oil companies we need to think about are the national oil companies who hold about 80% of the reserves going forward. They're companies like Saudi Aramco, Qatar Petroleum, Kuwait Petroleum, Pertamina, Sonangol, names that you may be less familiar with. They're the companies that have the big oil reserves. And we've been working with them on a whole range of CSR-type activities, and we need to. Some of these companies produce vast amounts of oil, but with the oil comes associated gas. Now, because they need to produce a lot of oil, they don't have very big populations. In a large number of places, that gas just gets burnt. It goes up the flare. It's energy that you can't use, or can't use easily. You can't use it the way we would use it because there's no one to use it without running long pipelines or something. And so this oil's coming out of the ground. The associated gas is just being burnt. Now, environmentally, that's a disaster. And it's not easy to solve unless you can find a use for the gas. And so we've been helping them to build high energy using facilities that burn gas, because that energy's got to be used somewhere, and that's the way to go. So we're building things like fertiliser plants, aluminium smelters that use vast amounts of power. And for the environment, that's a very effective thing to be doing. The other aspect of these national oil companies is that they're committed to building their own nation. So the oil's going to run out. When it runs out, what are they going to have left? And there's a real opportunity in those countries to help them with their nation-building activities. And so we see that as another role that we can play as an organisation in assisting them. And one way we've been doing that for many years is training the local people and bringing them to Australia and running full training programs for them in their own countries so that they can actually provide their own engineering and project delivery resources. Now, that's been extremely successful, and so as we've then moved into new countries like Angola and Nigeria, we've been absolutely welcomed because we run training programs that assist local people. Look, I think I've probably exceeded my time. I'm getting the nod, but thanks very much for the opportunity just to say a few things. I think the CSR, the whole concept of companies taking expanded responsibility for the future, for people, for the environment, for making the world a better place for our children is a wonderful concept. I think we have to all play our part. I've been excited today about hearing people make that commitment to play a part. We all need to play our part. I think legislation and other things can also help us in the future, but if we wait for it, it'll be too late. As organisations, and I hope you'll take the message back to your organisation, to get on the bandwagon, to start participating in these activities and to do it individually as well. Get the solar panels on your roof. It's not that hard to do. You just ring up and order them and they come and install it, and before long you're a little power generator. So I'll leave it at that, but thanks very much.
That is much appreciated, Peter, and I think your company is an example for all of us and also an inspiration, so thank you very much. Why are Ford and GM in trouble in the States? Well, do you know what's the fastest growing car in the States? It's made by a company called Toyota, and it's a Prius. And that goes with solar panels and a whole lot of other things, but this is not a commercial for Prius. This is a commercial for Anne-Maree Huxley. Anne-Maree Huxley is the inspiration here today. I don't think she needs any introduction whatsoever. She's going to talk about two vital ingredients in your life. One you want, one you need. You want success, you need sustainability. Anne-Maree.
Thanks, Rob. I'm not sure I'm fully going to cover both of those topics, but CSR is a journey. And Peter, thank you for sharing the journey of WorleyParsons, because it's the journeys of companies. We're all at a different place at a different time. And I'm going to share a little bit about the journey of how we got here today. I have a marketing background, and I have been involved in sponsorship and corporate community investment for many, many years. And it was actually I was wearing two hats at the time. I was the president of the Sponsorship Marketing Association, and I was observing what was happening around the world. I started to see the introduction of private-public partnerships, and I also was very taken when we found that we had more companies in the top 100 economies than there were countries, and I mentioned that fact this morning. I was also a judge for the Financial Review Partnership Awards, and I did a lot of work with them, helping people around the country to understand what was best practice. And we started to introduce some new questioning there, which was about the triple bottom line. And it was fascinating in those days, because we're only talking like 4 years ago, we were asking the question about who was providing triple bottom line reporting, and was anyone reporting into the Global Reporting Initiative? Where? Okay. And people were asking, well, what is that all about? They had no idea, and I thought, this is really interesting, and we started to see this language being introduced that appeared as rhetoric. So at that point, I thought, okay, I want to find out what is happening around the country. So I spent 6 months having a look around the country at who was doing what and what the knowledge level was. And I have to be honest with you, I was absolutely flabbergasted. The likely suspects, some of the leading global consultancies in the world, didn't have CSR practitioners. They were doing little bits and pieces. Most of it was through their foundations, which was, this was just CSR from a philanthropic point of view. And I really started to look. I really was hungry at that stage, and I was very fortunate to find out about a CSR leadership program that was being run by Sharon Jackson. Sharon is from the UK, and she had been coming to Australia for a couple of years running these leadership forums, and she'd actually been working with virtually most of the top corporations around the country. And I happened to go to this particular leadership forum in Tasmania, and we all happened to be change agents. Now, Sharon's associate faculty at Cranfield University. She's lecturing now at Oxford, and at Cambridge, Cambridge. And so she was very early on in terms of education in the management schools, because the MBA at Cranfield is considered to be number 2 throughout Europe. So she was really on the cutting edge of what was happening in the UK, and they are best practice, there's no question. You ask anyone and they'll say that the UK very much leads the way. So I have so much to be grateful to Sharon for. I continually say this. So Sharon is down the back, and Sharon was bringing people like David Grayson into the country, who is one of the UK's sort of leading authors, and he was involved in setting up business in the community. So we talked about, where was Australia really at? And I think it was the fact that we were a group of change agents that meant that we had a slightly different conversation. So in having that conversation, we knew that there was legislation in other parts of the world, and we thought, what does Australia need? And we knew that education, not legislation, was the answer. So we decided we would put together a conference. A little bit wobbly, as it happens sometimes with a group of people, but we got a summit off the ground last year. That summit had over 50 specialist speakers, 7 internationals, 5 of those came from the UK. And we deliberately had that sort of influence from the UK, purely and simply because they were at the cutting edge. They're the ones who are really guiding what's happening around the rest of the world. 380 delegates arrived, and people were saying to me, well, what next? And it's like, well, it's not for me to actually decide what is next. We've put this together to really try and bring business, government and community together to look at CSR in this country. There were 2 initiatives that were seeded at last year's summit. Amanda is going to talk about one, but one of the initiatives, there was an overwhelming approval from everybody there. They wanted an industry body. 98% wanted ongoing networking and education. That was going to be the core of an industry body. And it was really important. People feel alone, and I heard this in the CEO forum this afternoon. People want and need to come together to talk about some of these issues. And they need to talk about it because it's a journey, and we're all at different places along the way. So I spent 6 months after running the summit last year, talking to people around the country to look at what is it that's required. And I wanted to make sure there were absolutely no blinkers on. I wanted to be able to deliver an organisation and programs that was actually going to put Australia at the forefront of sustainability on a global basis. We lead in so many areas, and in fact, the world are asking questions. They think that we're going to have a lot of answers here. I get emails, connections from Japan and South Africa and all sorts of places. People are really interested in what's happening in Australia. So, Meurs was born. It was really important in coming up with a name that we had a name. Everything's got an acronym these days that, it had an acronym that meant something. And apart from the fact that the logical CSR names were already taken, it was like, okay, what are we all about? Most people in general mainstream business, they still have this idea that corporate social responsibility is about philanthropy, and so many don't realise it is a business model. So in calling it models of success and sustainability, it was important that we could say that CSR is a model, is a business model, but they can also be model companies involved. And we know if there is no business case, people won't get involved. So that's part of that success, and CSR is a framework to sustainability. So that's how Meurs was born. And it was important with Meurs. I mean, if we think about plant moss, it's not very sexy. But if we don't have it, we know we're in trouble. And I talked about some facts and stats this morning about companies, in the top sort of 100 that are not around 10 years later or 20 years later. Companies that have CSR, generally speaking, are much more sustainable and are likely to have a longer future. So it's sort of a bit of a parallel with both of those. And in coming up with the logo, CSR is that journey. We all get on at different points, and it's important that we try and work together and keep each other on it. So that's really how Meurs came about. I've sort of digressed a little bit, but that's okay. I don't want to go too much into detail, but I do want to say that out of those people who were involved in last year's summit, a number of them put up their hand. And we have worked to develop an industry body. We've been, apart from the fact that this is an initiative of Meurs, we've been running some networking events in the capital, in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, and we want to go national next year. We also have some international ambassadors, and they're opening doors for us at all sorts of levels. Sharon Jackson, with what they're doing at Cranfield, a great source of education and information to us in Australia. David Grayson has been opening doors for us around the world to connect with educational institutes and others who are involved in CSR. So we are so lucky here in Australia that we've got people who have really worked hard internationally to get their contacts and connections that are opening those doors to us. And the third person who's one of our international ambassadors is Lord Michael Hastings. And when Michael came to us last year, he was the head of the BBC CSR division. And he has recently joined KPMG as head of global corporate citizenship. And Michael's been in the country just recently, and he's doing some wonderful things with KPMG. So we've got some fine people behind us. It was interesting today on some of the blogs. I just had a quick look before, and some people are saying, how can I and how do I make a difference and how can I get involved in CSR? Well, we'd like to think that there are a number of ways that you can actually get involved. We want, and we've got the foundation of some committees right around the country that will run some local networking and educational events, a national advisory board. One of the initiatives, there are a couple that I want to briefly talk about, but one of the initiatives, I'll ask Kirian Withers to come forward. Kirian is involved in the magazine industry. And one of the things that people want and need are those case studies and that inspiration. So, Kirian, if you would briefly like to just talk about another initiative that's coming up for us.
Hi. Okay. Sustainable Futures, the magazine. In order to have longevity to document and continue to drive this discussion, I think there's nothing more valuable than a regular publication. It grounds what's going on in this type of community. My experience, for those of you who know me as Spa Guru, Wellness has been my business. 13 years ago, I noticed there was no spa industry in Australia, which is health spas and day spas. Most women will know what that is now. But 13 years ago, there was this wellness movement overseas, and there were no spas here. And I saw that that was definitely the way to, in our fast-paced world, to create high peace. The spas were going to be very important. And so I created a publication which is hiding behind Sustainable Futures. And this brought the knowledge from overseas to help to inform the fledgling industry of wellness here. And as we launched the Australasian Spa Association to serve the growing spa industry as it started to evolve, this was that the magazine was able to form a communication vehicle behind all the great minds that were overseas and starting to evolve the industry here. So the magazine played a very important role. And I think that's what's needed now. The wellness of the individual is not possible without the wellness of the planet. You can't be healthy if the planet is sick, and you can't be healthy if your communities are sick. And so we need that is a top priority. So by having a magazine that communicates all of this knowledge and keeps the dialogue going all year round, we will be able to help to maintain a higher energy level, bring in the overseas intelligence to teach us better how to do it, be able to shine the spotlight on all the great work that's being done, and perhaps a little spotlight on the work that's not so good, and help to encourage it to change. And so hopefully by next conference we'll all have them well and truly in our hands.
Thanks, Sue. We're proposing that it's going to be a free magazine paid for by the advertising, and if any of you on the website in the not too distant future, you'll have an opportunity to log on to say that you want to receive free subscriptions. We're thinking that the first edition will be out in about June, July. So we're really thrilled about that as an initiative for us. And many people have been putting their hand up, and the sessions this morning struck a real chord with some of the people in our audience, in particular about Australia lagging behind the rest of the world in the CSR movement. I was really quite excited to be told that maybe there are some major changes afoot. And one particular delegate here today is looking to actually take an education arm of Meurs, CSR within Australia, to actually list a public company in Australia so that both small to medium enterprises and individuals have an opportunity to directly invest into corporate social responsibility in Australia. It's a chance to make a real difference, and I am sure that there are many individuals who may want to play a role in that. So if any of you are interested in taking that a step further, please come and see me, and I'll introduce you to the person who is looking to actually make that public listing, so we can raise the well-needed funds that we need to actually take CSR across Australia. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about the programs, but peer-to-peer learning is absolutely so critical. And not only do we need peer-to-peer learning, we need industry education. Interestingly, nowhere in the world, to the best of my knowledge, and this is coming from people who are right across Europe, they're virtually saying there is no industry training. But we know in this country that that's the one way that we can actually get this message out to the masses, by developing train-the-trainer modules that industry own and can actually take and filter down through their organisations. So that we've got a 10-year plan that has been mapped out. There is a role that you can play. 2 leading Australian companies, or in fact 2 leading international companies, have already put their hand up. One of them is TNS. I don't think Vince is here. He had to catch a flight unexpectedly this afternoon. But TNS are a research company. And it's so important. We don't have much research in Australia about CSR and the trends. So TNS are going to play a really important role in capturing some of that information for us. But more importantly, we need to provide, whether it's the results of that research or otherwise, we need this information out in through the media. So we're going to be putting together some training programs, even for media, in terms of what CSR is. And to help us along the way with that, Edelman International are going to play a major role. They're the largest independent public relations agency in the world, and they have a vested interest in actively working with organisations that seek to raise the bar of business and stakeholder activity and actions. As the first organisation of its kind in Australia, they were drawn to Meurs because they believe that it's a unique opportunity to champion the development of a true and deep CSR commitment in our country. Something that can not only provide a tangible benefit for business and organisations locally, but ultimately help in the ongoing positioning of Australia as the smart country. Ultimately, they also believe that the time is right for this sort of conversation, and their own research shows that more than ever before, government and NGOs are coming to the table carrying similar levels of trust from their key stakeholders, an environment that helps to encourage open and constructive dialogue. So I am absolutely thrilled tonight to be able to announce to you that we have 2 founding members in TNS and Edelman. So thank you so much. That's wonderful. But we need much more, and we will ultimately be as strong as we are as a collective. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in this organisation, I would love to talk to you. It was very timely in many regards that the Joint Parliamentary Committee, an inquiry into CSR, had suggested that they wanted to seed fund an industry body. That's been tabled in Parliament. It's not been accepted. There were 29 recommendations, and it could be several months before any of those recommendations are accepted. But we are in the process of putting together a submission to government, and we're after a significant chunk of money so that we can put together the training, the education, that inspiration that business need to get involved, and the tools. You know, people often don't know where to start, so we're really thrilled at that opportunity to be able to develop that. So if you would like to play a part, I would be absolutely delighted to meet with you and look forward to a really interesting journey as we make Australia, the lucky country, one of the most sustainable countries on the planet. Thank you. Now, I mentioned that there was another initiative that was seeded at last year's CSR Summit, and I would like to introduce to you, in fact, someone who, without their support last year, I probably would not have been able to do what I actually did with the CSR Summit. Amanda Little is not only a phenomenal marketing and communications specialist. She's got a background in PR. She's also one of the most divine human beings on the planet and has been very supportive of me, and we both share some similar passions. So I'd like to introduce to you Amanda, who's going to talk about another new organisation.
Good evening, everybody. I was sitting at the CSR conference about this time last year, and I was listening to a man called Ray Anderson speak. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard him speak. If you haven't, you can go on to the Interface Inc. Website and hear him talk. But he's a very accomplished, successful, inspirational man, and he's a southern gentleman from the USA, and he's got this lovely lilting voice. And he was talking about his journey in terms of transforming Interface and turning it from an industrial carpet company, which they make industrial carpet, into one of the first companies in a few years' time that's going to be completely zero footprint. Can you imagine turning an industrial carpets company and all the processes and all the chemicals into a company that has absolutely no footprint? That's what they're doing. So he's an inspirational man. Anyway, as part of his speech, he said this. He said, if we find in a future decade that we have destroyed the biosphere, it would have happened insidiously. One silted or polluted stream at a time, one collapsing fish stock at a time, one dying coral reef at a time, and so on. And in his lovely lilting southern accent, he went on for about 10 minutes. By which stage I had tears rolling down my cheeks. And what happened for me in that instant was all the information about climate change and global warming and losing butterflies and species went from being out there to being in here. And I thought, he's right. He's right. We're doing this one at a time. We're killing the biosphere where we live. And I'm going to do something about it. So That's one at a time. Because there is no silver bullet. We're not going to be saved by nuclear technology. We're not going to be saved by carbon trading, emissions trading. We have to change. And if you can imagine your lifestyle in a few years' time with, 60 to 90% less emissions, it's a bit different. So that's a lot of change by a lot of people, and it's got to happen one step at a time. There's no other way to do it. So that's what the organisation's about. It's about personal, business and community. So our mission is, Margot today was talking about big, hairy, audacious goals. Well, of course, Anne-Maree and I have got a few of those. And because at the end of Ray's speech, I turned to Anne-Maree and I said, one at a time, that's what we're going to do. And she said, yes, we've got to do it. So we're doing it together. But really, we see this as a positive process. I think it's very important to say that. I think a lot of the information around is scary, because it is scary what's happening to the earth. But it's important, we think, to act in a positive way and not to kind of, as Al Gore says, go from denial to despair, in the sense of we've got to take a positive approach. So a very important part of that is creating the blueprints. A big part of the way we think and the way we learn is having stories and blueprints. How did people do that? And sharing those is part of our mission. And we also sat down and we said, okay, how do we want to run this organisation from a principles point of view? And we came up with a number of core principles that we want to invite change rather than shaming change, in the sense of, or scaring people about it. We want to assume that people really do care, and I think that's been shown in the past few months. People really want to do things. They're waiting to know what to do, and a lot of people are doing a lot of things. Because it is all about change, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen this model of change. It's called the trans-theoretical model of change. But what it says is that at any one time we're all on a continuum of change. Now, and we're not all in action mode and making changes. If we were all really good at change, we'd be all fit and healthy and weigh our perfect weight and all that sort of stuff. And but change is really hard. We've got this model. We're working with that model, because what it says is that you ask different questions depending on where the person is and invite the change as they go along. And one of our other goals was, well, why don't we ring up Ray and ask him to be our patron? We didn't actually ring him up. We worked with the interface people here, and we wrote to him, and he said yes. So Ray Anderson, the chairman and founder of Interface Inc., one of the most progressive companies in the world, is our patron, which we're very happy about. And we've also got a number of initiatives that we're launching into next year, which I'll talk very briefly about. The first is a little bit like the process today with Margot, is having a vision is a very powerful thing, and it draws, once we've got a vision and we work on that as a group, that creates energy amongst the group, but it also creates pathways in our brains to actually achieve these things. So we're going to have community leader forums, working with community leaders and saying to them, okay, how does change look in your community towards being more sustainable, and what are the action steps that group can take? So we're going to be running those around the country. We also want to hold an inaugural Zero Footprint Week. Now, this will be an awareness week around sustainability. There's lots of things being done by lots of people, and we want to hold a week and showcase all of those things, put the spotlight on, well, how do you do these changes? What is it like to put the solar panels on your roof? What is it like to change your organisation? How do you do all that? And that's the thing we're going to talk about in the third week of October next year. And part of that will be a barefoot day. And this is, it started off as a sort of a joking concept where we get people to take their shoes off and walk on the grass. And everyone said, oh, well, what about the health and safety if people take their shoes off, and, you'd have to comb the grass to make sure there's nothing there. And, isn't that terrible that we're so disconnected from nature that we can't even walk? We can't have people walking on grass, taking their shoes off, for goodness sake. So a big part of what we want to be on about is reconnecting people with nature. And I have to say, Anne-Maree, I love this venue, being able to see water as opposed to being inside, four walls where you just you could be anywhere, any place. I really like the connection here, and I think there's something like 50 or 60% of people that live in cities, and by 2040 that's going to be like 80% of people in the world. Yeah, and it's really hard in the city to have a connection with nature. So a big part of what we want to do is to help people make that connection, because if you can connect back with the rainforest or the grass or the trees or the butterflies, that is also going to be inspirational in terms of tackling climate change. And I'm also really delighted to announce that Anne-Maree was part of the climate project this last weekend. She is now an official climate messenger, trained by Al Gore, and one of the things that we'll be doing also is rolling out the Australian version of an Inconvenient Truth presentation. So Anne-Maree is an accredited Al Gore messenger now, and that will be a big part of what we do next year. We're also supporting Mariella and her team. Mariella's over here with the camera. She's making a documentary on called The Future Makers, which is again the positive blueprints for change. These are people who are out there in industry doing it. I personally believe that business is the only engine that's going to achieve the change that we need. So I think that that's where the change is going to come from. So she's shooting a documentary, and we're supporting her in terms of getting funding. So that's really a bit about what we're going to be doing. We're excited, and if anybody would like to talk to me or Anne-Maree about it during the conference, I'll be here tomorrow. I'll be pleased to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
I would just like to say, Amanda, you just sort of reminded us talking about looking outside in this fantastic venue. Can I just say, I have just been so delighted about the support that I've had from Luna Park to have this forum here. And in fact, so much so that we're actually looking to have a very large forum here this time next year. We're looking to have an exhibition in the Big Top so that we can bring business and organisation together to have a look at how they can get involved. I was in the Philippines this year at a CSR conference. I was there to speak. And it was absolutely amazing. Imagine this. They had 4,000 people at their conference. Their conference was held in their official CSR week. There was an 8-page supplement that went out in the newspaper prior to the event. They had full-page advertisements and editorial each day, and then they had a 6-page supplement to end it up. One of the things that they did with their forum, apart from the fact that they also did CEO research to get the trends and understand what CEOs were doing, you know, we look at places like Europe. Countries like the Philippines who have got some serious triggers, they are so far advanced. There's so much we can learn from them. But one of the things that I loved that they did as part of their activities is they had a very large exhibition which showcased a lot of the community activities. And they used it to actually drive volunteering both in the community and through the corporate sector. So that's one of the initiatives that we would like to develop next year. And one of the things that we will actually be looking for, and this looks like a pretty good location for us. They've been absolutely fantastic. I will highly recommend them if you're looking for functions. They're truly wonderful. But one of the things that we will be looking for is we would like 10 corporations to put in $10,000 each before the end of this year to help us fund putting that next event together. Now, tickets to this particular event are about $2,500. So one of the things that we want to reward those people who help us fund this is if you actually provide the $10,000, one of the many things you'll get is about $25,000 worth of tickets. So if there are some organisations in the room, it's not a big ask, but we would like 10 companies, $10,000 apiece, money by the end of the year, to help us to actually grow this. We had about 128, I think, today. We've got about 110 tomorrow. But those numbers are so small. We need to get to many more people. And having particularly a very large exhibition where we encourage people through, I think is going to be most helpful. So thanks to Luna Park, and again, highly recommend it. They've been absolutely fantastic, so thanks.
What more can be said? We've heard it all. I just wanted to ask you, have you ever come across Norman Drummond? Norman Drummond, Amanda? Norman Drummond wrote a book called Spirit of Success. And he's a great one for this whole idea of changing the world one-on-one, one by one, in community. So you're just doing that. That's fantastic. And we can all do it one by one, one-on-one, in community. So thanks for your attendance, thanks for your attention, and thank you guys for your presentations. Enjoy the evening.